So, welcome. My name is Emma. I am the local project manager for the Healthy Kids Community Challenge. My contact information is just up here. It's also in the folders that you received, so come and find me at any point throughout the day if you need to. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all of you for being here today, making your way down to Picton. We are very excited for the event that we have lined up. We've got some great speakers and workshops planned for you, so it should be a really exciting day. To start things off, I am just going to take you through a little bit of background about what the Healthy Kids Community Challenge is. It's going to be really brief, and then I'll just go over a bit of logistics for how the day is going to work. So, in terms of the problem that we currently have in Ontario, about 30% of children and youth are overweight and obese in the province, and that can lead to problems both now and in the future for those children. So, when we look at why that is, there's a whole network of reasons. The big ones being healthy eating and physical activity. But to bring your attention to a few, our children today are not active enough. About 93% of children and youth are not meeting the physical activity guidelines between the ages of 5 and 11 of getting 60 minutes per day. So that's a huge percentage. When we look at screen time, children are obviously spending a lot of time in front of their tablets, their laptops, their TVs, whatever it may be. Around 8 hours per day is what's estimated for each child to be spending in front of their screens. That's equivalent to a full workday. So it's a huge, huge amount. We also have overconsumption of high-calorie foods, so healthy eating is something we really want to be focusing on. And sleep time in our children has also decreased by about 30 to 60 minutes per night over the past decade alone. When you look at that, sleep habits are linked to healthy weights for kids. Lack of optimal sleep can increase the risk of childhood overweight and obesity by about 58%. So it definitely has an effect. In terms of a solution, what the Ontario government has come up with is they had a report released in 2013 called No Time to Wait. It is the Healthy Kids Strategy Report, and one of the key action items in that report is that they needed to have some kind of community-based programming that would be available to help support healthy weights for kids. And that is really why we have the Healthy Kids Community Challenge now. So the Healthy Kids Community Challenge is just a component of Ontario's Healthy Kids Strategy, but it's one we're going to focus on today. So the goal of the challenge is to promote healthy weights for kids. It focuses on children and youth aged 0 to 12. The Ontario government initiated an application call earlier, and there were tons that came in. We were really lucky. Hastings and Prince Edward counties is one of 45 communities that was accepted to participate in the challenge. So it was fantastic news for us. The challenge is meant to be very much about community partnerships, so it's public health, it's education, it's recreation, it's community businesses, all kind of working together to help meet that goal of increasing and promoting healthy weights for kids. The challenge is the first of its kind here in Canada, and it is based on best practices set forth by the World Health Organization. As you can see on the screen here, we are receiving up to $1.125 million over a 3-year period in order to let this challenge happen and create solutions. It's meant to initiate new programs and to support existing programs in our community. So, the Healthy Kids Community Challenge is theme-based. Like I said, there's a whole multitude of factors that contribute to our overweight and obesity problem. So for that reason, it's going to be based on themes. About every 9 months, the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care will release a new theme for the province, and it'll relate to protective factors for healthy weights. So you can see the big ones up there: healthy eating, physical activity, and healthy habits, which is things like adequate sleep. Our current theme is Run, Jump, Play every day. You can see one of our banners here for it. So that's what we're currently working on. This theme encourages physical activity through a mix of active play, active transportation, sports, and structured physical activity. First up, we have Drew Mitchell. He is the head of physical literacy for Sport for Life Canada, and he's going to inform us about what physical literacy is and why it's important. So please welcome Drew.
Thanks, Emma. And thank you very much for coming today. I hope there's still men somewhere, because myself and the couple of Y chromosomes at the back of the room know that women are taking over the world. We know that. This part of the world, I'm actually from Vancouver, just outside of Vancouver, Port Moody, for those of you know your geography in British Columbia. Prince Edward County is where I had my first honeymoon. Yes, I had more than one. And where my kids' family cottage is at Presqu'île. And so I've been here every year for the last 25 years at the cottage. So it's familiar territory, I have to say. Physical literacy, how many have heard the term before? Okay, great. What I'm going to talk about today and what physical literacy is, it's nothing new. Okay, this is not some whiz-bang, super-duper new thing. You know how things go around, come around, loop back? A lot of the concepts that are inside this, which has been packaged a little differently, you've seen before. You may be doing right now. So I really want to emphasize that what I'm going to talk about today is probably going to be very familiar in many ways, maybe from a different context. And what I'm hope is that, especially this afternoon, is that we can get into a bit more of a rich and deep discussion around some of this. This morning I'm going to talk a little bit about where we can go with this. So today, this is what today looks like. How many of you have one of these? Oh, come on. Like everybody's got one of these. I was giving you a chance, really? So this is today's landscape. And you know, our connectivity to our phones and various other devices, that's one thing. Multiply that by 10 to kids, right? I mean, it's their thing. That's what they do with it. And this is a big part of how they communicate, how they gather information. What it does tell us in many ways is that they will do time on task in a big way, right? Like they're super committed. So our opportunity, and the opportunity that exists for all of us, is how do we take some of that time on task focus and put it somewhere else? Maybe back into activity. That's the opportunity that exists there. We also need to realize that this is not the problem, this is the outcome. This is what's happened. So let me just take us back. How many of you were, when you were young, tore out of your house and was playing in the green space and tearing around like a mad person? Yeah, okay. So we all had, many of us had that. How much roaming room do you think you had from your house? Miles? Like big time, right? You had lots of latitude. Today, for an 8, 9, 10-year-old, how much latitude do you think they have? The yard? Maybe a cul-de-sac if it's kind of, you know, it's kind of cool. Okay. When we started ramping back and restricting more what our kids could do, so having that freedom that we had, where do you think they ended up? In front of the screen. And the screens evolved, right, over time. It was a TV a while ago, and then it was a computer. Now it's a handheld device, right? So we own this. We have to be very realistic. And this is not a physiological issue. This is a behavioral issue. This is about behavior. This is about adult behavior and how we've dealt with kids. Okay, so again, the unrestricted free play, unstructured play, pretty much gone by the way of the dinosaur. It really has. Certainly in the urban environment. There's a bit more rural out here. There might be a bit more latitude. Fair enough. Dawn's going to talk to you this afternoon, for those of you that are going to go outside a little bit more, is that I think in ECE in particular, that's still a bit golden, depending on policies and restrictions and rules that you do come across, and Dawn will bring some of that up as well. But ECEs, for the most part, actually get out there and touch the green space a lot more than everybody else does, certainly more than schools do. Schools can be very restrictive sometimes, depending on the administrator, depending on the board, and so on and so forth. The built environment, it's hit and miss. Really depends. How much are kids playing in playgrounds? You know, parent advisory counselors sitting there pulling their hair out. What do we build? What do we build for the playground? Where do we put our money? How do we build this? Do the kids know how to use the tool? Do they know how to use the playground? Walking to school. Big part, right? Big part. This little guy right here, lots of research done around the physiology of this, so about 2,000 steps a day gone out of this little guy's life. For his size, that's about 100 calories a day, 200 school days a year. It's about 4 or 5 pounds in a year. That's the physiology. I think the greater loss is all the great decision-making that little guy would have to and from school, and the interaction with his friends, which again is now gone. Stuff we took for granted, right? And then, of course, come home when the streetlights come on. Hollering, a lost art. Your parents calling you for dinner. Where the hell are you? For those of you that follow the news, it's been very interesting. Down in the United States, in the state of Maryland, this couple had taught their kids, 10-year-old, 6-year-old, they had a park about a mile from their home, taught them how to get to the park, how to come home from the park, how to play in the park. 3 times on the way home from that park, the kids were picked up by the police. The 3rd time, the parents were charged. Yeah, I know, it's exactly like, really? So it's really spawned, for those of you that use the Google, you can Google free-range parents. It's actually really spurred on that movement in the United States. We've gotten to a little bit of a crazy place sometimes with some of this stuff. This is driven by 2 main things. Perceived safety or lack of safety. The white panel van is around the corner waiting to abduct my child or hurt my child. And I mean, it's realistic in people's minds because the media has made it realistic. Who wants to be an Amber Alert, right? Who really wants to be the Amber Alert? But some interesting stats from participation last year. 1 in 14 million chance of being abducted by a stranger, and a 1 in 4 chance of being overweight or obese. Very interesting comparable stats, right? 1 is right in our face. Okay, that's the being abducted one. And 1 is way down the road. And unfortunately today, we don't see stuff down the road well enough. We're sort of pushing it off. That's almost the basis to inactivity-based disease, right? It's part of the challenge. We don't see it today. Smoking's obvious, right? I'm smoking. I'm not smoking, right? Pretty obvious. Inactivity-based disease is a little bit more insidious. Right? It's kind of creeping up on us over time. We'll talk more about that today. So this is our landscape today and part of what we have to deal with. What are some of the outcomes? Well, this is part of our reality today. This is what we call a match pair study. It's a cross-section of the femur, the long bone of the leg. Across the top, we have 21-year-old gamers. And along the bottom, 21-year-old active people. They're matched for gender. I don't think you need to be a radiologist to figure this out. Houston, we have a problem. So with bone is a living tissue. It breaks down and builds up every day. That's why you're told to load your bone, right? You need to do weight-supported or weight-bearing activity to make sure that your bone breaks down and builds up every day. So there's 2 things about bone, bricks and architecture. You want good bricks and good architecture. In that top line, we don't have very good bricks. And our shape isn't so good. The really sad part of all this, you can't fix that. That's unrecoverable. We learned that when the astronauts went up to space for the very first time. They only exercised for an hour. They came back. They had this bone loss. They could never redo it. Now when they go up to space, Chris Hadfield's doing 2.5 hours of exercise every day to make sure that doesn't happen. We think osteoporosis is a problem today. 25, 30 years from now, that's going to be a real problem. So again, it's all kind of lying there. It's under the surface, so we don't necessarily see it. It's not in our face every day. Well, we've learned from smoking. We learned a lot from smoking. We learned we better not smoke. It's not a good thing. In 1999, we saw that smoking was at about 25%. The latest stats, actually, 2014, bring it down to about 15.8%. It's about a 9.5–10% decrease over that time frame. In this intervention, if we want to call it this, and it was a massive intervention, billions of dollars spent, right? Billions of dollars spent in smoking cessation. Today, even today, lots of that. And some serious kick-ass legislation. Like, you can't smoke anywhere. right? You can't smoke anywhere. So it's really interesting to see, what do we learn from what happened here when it comes to inactivity-based disease? What do we have to do? You want to press my button for me? It's the up arrow, down arrow. Over here. There you go. We're going forward. Oh, that's backwards. Oh, now I've made M. Okay, so here's our stats today. Sorry, I should be juggling now or something. Only I can't juggle. That's the problem. I'll just share. 85% of the population is sedentary, 62% overweight, and actually it's tracking in the wrong direction, right? It's actually increasing, and we've already seen the 27% obese, 2.5 million diabetics, 2.5 million. Over 50,000 total knee replacements. Why are total knee replacements there? 80% of total knee replacement is based on obesity. 80%. Okay? Next. Tracking to 2025, we're looking at 95% sedentary, 32% obesity, 3.7 million plus diabetics, and over 68,000 total knee replacements. It's not a good story. Thank you. So what's our lost productivity? Today, it's about $103 billion, lost productivity based on inactivity-based disease. Tracking up to $219 billion, and if I really want to make my point, I make it bigger. Okay? So this is real. These are facts. So how do we spend our money? Well, today, the majority of our money, and if you listen to every provincial government, territorial government in this country, $5 billion is spent per million people in healthcare. And let's be abundantly clear on this. It's sick care. It's making people who are either sick or almost sick not sick. Let's be very clear on that. And that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It's a thing. That's what it is. And I'll tell you right now, our healthcare system works. For the most part, you fall down, go boom, it works. So it's a very good thing. How much of that money in health do we put into public health, into preventative health? In this province, because I work across the country, and I'm very fortunate to do that, this province does a pretty good job through the health unit piece in public health. I'll tell you that right now. I'm quite amazed at the health promoters, the health educators that are in the system. Innovation is happening in pockets around this province between health and the other sectors, education, recreation, sport, where health is getting engaged in a way that health doesn't normally get engaged. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. Education, about $2.3 billion per million people. The challenge in this space around activity is that the focus of education is numeracy and literacy. Let's be very clear about that. That doesn't take away from the very passionate teacher who focuses on arts and drama, or focuses on PE, or focuses on science. The focus of the school board, the focus of the school system is numeracy and literacy. That's where almost all the resources go to. So we can't, let's all be, we can sit and banter back and forth around that, but that's the priority. So we're not getting service there either, really, in many ways. If we move down to the smaller, we call this the kids' table, at millions of dollars, sport, tourism, recreation, healthy living, it's substantially less. And in most communities in this country, this is the new health. This is not just about being not sick. This is about quality of life. I want to flourish. I want to be healthy. But we should be demanding that. I don't want to just not be sick. So we need to maybe flip this around. Hippocrates, many thousands of years ago, seemed to have it right. The function of protecting and developing health must rank even above that of restoring it when impaired. We've got it ass backwards. We really need to relook at this model. So the good news is that when you move, a lot of things are better. A lot of things. And there's a lot of solid research behind a lot of this stuff. For those of you in the teaching profession, which most of you are in, whether it's for very little people or a little bit bigger people, you know you have your own personal experiences on how movement can make your teaching experience that much easier or that much better. With little boys, what do we need to do? Do we trap them in a chair for an hour at a time and try and get them to do something? Are we crazy? So, I mean, there's lots of things here that are really important. The other thing is, movement is the first language of a child. It's how they're communicating. They're wobbling around, trying to figure things out, figure their world out. Yeah, I'm going to the next one. Let's end the next one. So what is physical literacy? Well, there'll be a quiz on this at the end of the day, so be ready for it. Physical literacy is the motivation, confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and understanding to value and take responsibility for engagement in physical activities for life. Whew. Big mouthful. A lot of people have felt that physical literacy is just the skills piece. It's just, it's fundamental movement skills. It is more than that, and we're going to talk more about that as we go along. So this is the consensus statement that last June in Vancouver at the International Physical Literacy Conference, the definition was driven into 4 main element areas. So the top element, or the first element area, is in motivation and confidence. It's called the affective domain. How do I feel about myself? What's my self-confidence? How do I feel internally? Physical competence is the next one. Again, that's the skills piece. Knowledge and understanding is do I value the importance of being physically active? This is a little tough, this one right here, for little kids. They don't quite get that. They certainly get the first 2, tearing around like mad people, and how I feel about that. And then the fourth one is really behavioral. It's kind of an outcome of the first 3. We really want to get to the point of having a better behavior around movement. So let's talk a little bit about skill-based literacies. So in your world, literacy and numeracy, as I've already talked about, it's a very intentional process that we have in our society today. So before kids even get to school, mom and dad are typically reading with them. That's the preschool literacy piece that's promoted in our society. Read with your kids. Get them engaged. Increase their word count. Build their understanding. It's an intentional, learned process. So we teach the ABCs. From there, they can form words and put sentences together, build paragraphs. And over time, they build a rich and deep vocabulary. 5,000 words, 10,000 words, 20,000 words. It's important. Again, done in the school, reinforced at home, and in other parts of society. Numeracy, same thing. We teach them numbers, put together fractions, do equations. It's a really important process. But we really don't like doing math homework with our kids. It's awful. It's challenging. Music, same thing. If you want to write music, you learn your do, re, mi's, your scales, your scores, maybe become a famous American music star. Oh, come on. He's really rehabilitating himself, don't you think? He's not peeing in garbage cans anymore. We drove by Stratford yesterday, so we felt the beeves right there. Physical literacy, no different than literacy and numeracy. You build your movement vocabulary. Your movement vocabulary is your fundamental movement skills, right? Your fundamental movement skills are your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. That's what they are. So it's important that we provide our kids with a wide variety of skills. We have a big bucket of skills. We want that bucket to be full, deep, and rich. And from there, with our activities that we do with our kids, we help them sequence those skills together so they can do tasks. And maybe one day do the pas de chat in Swan Lake. Next. If we don't do this, it all stops. And we know very clearly, literacy's been around for 110 years in Canada. We're one of the most literate countries in the world. It's a great success story. But we clearly know that if we don't follow that process that we have, that very intentional process, people are illiterate, and they are at least one arm tied behind their back for the rest of their life, if not 2. It's no different here. This is not innate. So just like kids who are good at language arts are good at math, there's kids who move better than other kids. You see that. You show them one time, boom, they got it. There's another kid who needs 5 tries, another kid who needs 15 tries or 20 tries. They're all different. So it's their ability to learn that separates them out. No different than with the other skill-based literacies. For some reason, we think this just happens. It doesn't. We need to be very intentional about this. And we're going to talk about physical activity and how we can enrich physical activity with some skill-based pieces. We'll talk more about that this afternoon, but we're going to talk a little bit about it this morning. So we really want to put on equal footing numeracy, literacy, and physical literacy. That's our goal. So I have the privilege right now of working with West Vancouver School District in my part of the world. We're doing a project with the grade 2s. They're in the process right now as a district at redoing the report card. So I'm reviewing the kindergarten report card, so that'll hit home for many of you in this room. And in the kindergarten report card, in health and it's not called physical education, it's called movement or physical movement, I think it's called, in kindergarten. They have 4 check-off points. Okay, so one of them is, are they developing fundamental movement skills, that type of language? Are they doing daily physical activity, our DPA? We have DPA in our province. And the other 2 are based on behavior. If you go to any other subject in that report card, there's not one question on behavior. Not one. Which is interesting. I'm not a kindergarten teacher. Many of you are. Okay? I understand behavior is part of the challenge. These guys can be terrorists. I totally get it. Totally get it. But are we maybe missing a little bit of an opportunity here? Just a little bit. And when we go to the gym, are we blowing off steam? Or are we teaching skills? And do we approach it that way? And by the way, as we're going to do a few things today, when we teach skills, it's not boring. We're going to make it kick-ass fun. Don't worry. And a lot of you that teach your activities right now, it's really just it's either reinforcing what you're currently doing or slightly adjusting it. So we're not asking you to do more. We're asking you to maybe look at your practice and how can we do it a little differently. That's all we're talking about, right? So learning to move is just as important as learning to read, right? And I'd say for your life course, for your lifespan, even more. Even more. Okay? Who put that slide in there? Okay. Types of fundamental movement skills. So many people think of fundamental movement skills. They tend to kind of think of the sport context or recreation or some types of activity. So there's 3 main categories. There's your body. So that's kind of balance and stability. Those particular areas right there. You know, and again, you see those kids who have better balance, better stability at a certain phase of their life than others. They're all, remember, kids can biologically be different from each other by upwards of 3 to 4 years, right? It's really challenging sometimes. Locomotor, it's them moving around. It can be things like running and walking. It can be hopping, skipping, jumping. Okay, lots of different things like that. You're getting a copy of the slide deck. Don't worry. You're getting a PDF. You're getting a PDF. No, I wanted you to have a little pain first. I want some skin in the game. And I appreciate that. Hey, listen, I'm not even halfway. I told you before then. And then object manipulation is what we do with our arms and legs, for the most part, right? If we're going to get a little bit more complicated, we can bop things off our head every now and again as well. So that'd be object manipulation as well. And so these are the main categories that we're looking at, and we want to make sure that when we're teaching activities, when we're providing activities for our little people, in particular, that we're grabbing some activities that are going to address each of these 3 areas in some way, shape, or form. But there's a whole bunch of other activities, other skills. Slithering, one of my favorite. Okay. We want to give kids a chance to really get out there and explore themselves. And I think, part of the challenge is even by the time you get them, there already may be kids who are not feeling so confident to move, right? And that's a real challenge. There's no doubt about that. But that's why I think it's so important. Like, your role in this is super important because you're at such a formative stage with these kids. Is that you can really lay down some stuff that can be so good for them for the rest of their life. Like, big time, okay? So this is a little diagram. There'll be a more complicated one this afternoon for those of you who are staying in the room. I want to sort of describe what the difference and the connectivity between physical literacy, physical activity, and physical fitness, because sometimes people get that a little mixed up. So I talked about fundamental movement skills, up there highlighted in yellow. We need to develop those to build our movement vocabulary, right? And then we want to put them all together in our practices, in our activities, whatever we're doing for movement. And we want to build a level of skills down here with physical literacy, because if we build some skills, typically if they're a bit more competent, they'll be a little bit more confident. And if they're a little bit more confident, they'll be more motivated to move, right? So if we have a little bit of this first, they're probably going to be a little bit more active, more apt to be a little bit more active. And if they're more active, they'll participate more often. If they participate more often, they'll get fitter. Part of the problem over the last 40 or 50 years in our messages of be active, eat well, be active, is we've been telling people to be active, but there's a whole bunch of people that don't feel confident enough to even start moving. So they can't even begin to be active. It's not happening. Includes adults, right? Includes adults big time. So until we make them a little bit more confident movers, we can't even address this. So really what we're saying is we need some of this to get some of this to create some of that. And if we create some fitness and we are physically literate, we can build some durability. Durability is a good thing. We want durable citizens. We want durable people in our lives. I'll share a small story about durability. My wife and I were amateur triathletes, heavy on the amateur. We were riding up in Penticton. For those of you that have been to British Columbia, Penticton's a pretty nice place, up on the Naramata Bench, 30 wineries. We didn't touch any of the wineries, but we were riding our bikes. Coming down the hill, my wife's about 2 minutes in front of me. She comes around a corner, hits some gravel, ends up in a ditch at 35 kilometers an hour, breaks all 12 ribs on one side of her body. Blows apart her clavicle. She has 9 screws in her clavicle, rebuilt. Her acromion process, which comes off her scapula, has 8 screws in it. She fractures her scapula into 3 pieces, which is really hard to do. She fractures 3 vertebrae in her spine, dislocates 1. And when you dislocate a vertebra, there's 80% chance you're going to have spinal cord damage. She fell in the 20, punctured both lungs. She's lying in a ditch. I'm 2 minutes behind her. Fortunately, somebody saw her come by because her and her bike are in the ditch. It's 12 feet deep. I would have ridden right by her. She would have died. So that happened at the end of June last year. By the end of September, she's back on her bike. By the end of November, she's swimming 2K with a shoulder that didn't exist. She's going to compete this year in the challenge in Penticton. She's going to ride 120 kilometers, and she's going to swim 3 kilometers. What is she? Freaking durable. I'm serious. 53 years old and durable. We have a whole retiring baby boomer generation. Many of them are going to look to be active. How do we engage them? How do we make them durable? $6.6 billion is spent in Canada every year on falls. Old people falling down on the ground, breaking their hip, doing damage. How do we get our society more physically literate? Make them better movers. Reduce some of these things, these quality of life issues, these cost issues, so on. So I'm giving you all a new job title today. Every kid has their own trajectory, and you can see it's not a straight line. You now are all physical literacy trajectory managers. That's your job. I'm going to give you a business card. I'll make it an acronym. It'll be a little easier to talk about. But as you can see, everybody has their own pathway. Again, when you get them, They're all in different shapes and formats and confidence and levels that you get them at. When you have them, how do you affect them over the time frame you have them? How do you send them forward? Can we influence the way you currently do your practice? And can you be a champion to others around you? Okay? So this is our new model for intervention. I don't think it's pie in the sky. I think it's very realistic. So regardless of what delivery system you're in, we feel that you can provide a quality physical literacy experience for everybody you work with. And we can measure it and assess it in a whole bunch of different ways. Yeah, we can do that, no problem. But at the end of the day, what do we want? We want meaningful participation. It's not an unrealistic goal. And if we're really lucky, we're going to flourish. Or as the Greeks call it, eudaimonia. Not a bad thing. If we can get to this outcome, we feel that we can really have positive physical and mental health. Because they're connected. They're very intimately connected. We hope that we don't have to interact with the justice system. That's a good thing. We see in a lot of high school situations, high school settings, and with youth in particular, sport is used a lot to ensure that they don't interact with the justice system. Why do kids join gangs? They want to belong, right? That's what team sport is, last time I checked. And hopefully we can have gainful employment. So at the end of the day, I don't think that's unrealistic. So going back to our literacy numeracy, or literacy, physical literacy piece, we want to use the same language. Language that you already use down your literacy stream. We want to have vocabulary. We want to be fluent. We want to be proficient. Everybody has their own level of mastery, right? They are going to move towards that. Even at the young age that they're at, they're starting to refine those things. And we want to develop a reasonable level of physical literacy. It is over the life course. And it's not just the domain of recreation and sport. It tends to be there a lot, but it's bigger than that. In the performance arts, how many of you have seen Cirque du Soleil? Would you say they're physically literate? Oh, yeah. Some of the most physically literate people in the world. And just to give you the right context again, in your job, with what you do, you create the environment and the opportunity for physical literacy to be developed. That's what you do every day when you're working with your kids. So whether kids are in sport or some physical activity that they do or dance, it's all building skills. It's a marvelous thing. It's a marvelous thing. Vocation, if your job is very physical, being physically literate is going to be important. If I'm on the job site and someone's hucking a hammer at me, I really hope they can throw. And I can catch. Okay? So there's lots of important things there. Activities of daily living. If we have a better, more confident moving population, we're going to have more of this happening. More people being active on a daily basis in the way that they want to be. They're going to have choice. And in the intervention area, I talked a little bit about the fractures piece already, the falling piece. But this is a very interesting one. ACL, so addresses this room. Girls and women have a higher incidence of rupturing their ACL versus boys and men by 6 to 1. 6 to 1. How many have ruptured their ACL? Yeah, okay. You've lived the dream. And what did you do it in? And what do we say in soccer? What do we call soccer? A cutting sport? Yes. Yeah, exactly. You? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, almost guaranteed. Yeah. Yeah, there we go, right? And so what happens is for years they've been trying to figure out why this happens. Is it the Q angle on women versus men, right? Their hips are wider, so the Q angle down to the knee. Is it the hormone level? So they've been really, it's been a bit of a mystery. Most recently, the NCAA did a big study where they actually did a skill-based intervention with their women athletes, and they reduced 6 to 1 down to 1.5 to 1, which was really interesting. It's early days, but what they're finding is, could it be the brain-muscle connection and the skill development component that is one of the protective pieces around that? Still early days. We'll figure that out as we move along. So it's important that we try and provide a wide variety of environments for our, in your case, your little people, to move around in. Most of the time we're on the ground. We know that. We're on the grass, we're on the turf, we're in the gym, we're on the ground. So that's where we spend most of our time. And in this part of the world, not my part of the world, ice and snow. Okay? Ice and snow is a reality for quite a few months of the year. And we know with many older people, if this happens, what happens to them? They don't go anywhere, right? So we need to make these environments less a barrier, less intrusive in our life. This is really important because if you don't know what to do in there, you die. And especially with so much water around here, it makes a big difference. But we know as our country starts to shift and change culturally, we have an ever-growing number of people who don't know how to swim. Should it be a public policy that everybody should learn how to swim? Just throw that out there. And for a small handful of people, they get to play in the air. And that's very cool. Very cool. We knew when we were climbing trees when we were a kid, we wanted to make sure we stayed connected to the tree and didn't play in the air. Because we come in contact with that real quick. And it's never any fun. Now, oh, sorry, just one. Can you go back one more? Sorry. A lot of the time we spend indoors, as I mentioned earlier, I think the more that we can get outdoors, the better. And we know that ECEs have been pretty creative around some of that stuff, which is awesome. My big worry is, and again, all of you indicated that you had that time when you were young, where you interacted here in the green space. As our kids don't interact that much here, they're going to become the stewards of that green space in 20 or 30 years. Are they going to pave the whole damn thing? Don't know, right? So the gateway to active participation is really physical literacy for many people. Again, for those people that pick it up quickly, not so much, okay? Because, again, they pick it up easily. It is important that we develop that physical literacy to reinforce the activity. And it is a journey, not a destination. It's not like you wake up one morning and go, hey, I'm physically literate. Awesome. Way to go. How many have seen this before? Oh, not a person. Excellent. Give me 1 second. Nobody's seen that before? Really? How many remember the old pyramid in the sports system? Put your hand up. Okay, so you remember that one. This is the new rectangle. Next year we're going to have a parallelogram. No. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No. So for those of you that remember the old pyramid, the pyramid was great because you came in the bottom, there was lots of inclusivity at the bottom, and you made your way up the pyramid until you were too crappy enough and you got kicked out the sides. It was not a really happy place for a lot of people. Not very inclusive. So what happens here is we reshape it and basically make the tent to fit everybody. Everybody now has a place where they can land. So you guys play down in this space down in here. So active start, fundamentals, learn to train is basically 0 to 12 years old. So it's formative years, right? Now we talk about developing physical literacy in here, but we don't limit it. You can teach an old dog new tricks. Physical literacy can be developed for anybody at any age. But we know with any of our training and education, that's why our kids go to school when they're young. It's their formative time to learn. So if we lay down that good work, so most of you work in the active start and just bridge fundamentals. So active start is 0 to 5, and then fundamentals is 6 to 9. The whole idea here is if we can actually do some really good skill development here and kind of make the bed as they walk up all the way through here, there's probably a greater chance that they're going to be active for life. That's our hope, right? If we lay the foundation down, we hope that they can be active for life. Now, some of those kids, some of those people may decide that they want to go down sport and do sport in a more serious way. Our soccer, skiing, and volleyball athletes, as an example. And they may want to go to the Ontario Games. They may want to go to the Canada Games. They may want to go to the Olympic Games. They may want to play in the NHL. Well, that's this small little triangle right here. It's a very small part of the system. But it does tend to suck the oxygen out of the air every now and again, right? Every 4 years, big hockey game happens. We all get excited, patriotic for like 10 minutes. and then we forget about it. Unlike our neighbors to the south who are patriotic every 10 minutes. So really, in this particular situation, in your role is you're starting to help lay down that foundation. Your role's critical to what's going on. And so here are the sectors that actually play in the game. Most of you sit down the middle here in schools. Every kid is in the school system except for the ones that are homeschooled. So we know that they are captured right here. A lot of people feel this should be the solution to the whole problem. That's unrealistic. It's totally unrealistic. You have a role, and schools are complicated. We understand that schools are complicated. We understand the ratios are high. We understand the training is not always there. And one of the challenges in the school system in particular is we haven't invested in our human capital. If we talk about developing another goddamn resource, I'm going to scream. We need to invest in people, in you. How can we expect people to teach PE properly when we don't train them to do it? Okay, that's the definition of insanity. It really is. So that's something that is an issue here. In recreation, we know the problem there is they have trained staff, they have physical plant, they have lots of different things going on, but not everybody's there. You got to show up. You got to show up at the rec center. Same with the sports system. Again, trained coaches, facilities provided by recreation, because remember, the recreation sport connection is very tight. They own or run all the facilities and provide programs. They use those facilities. That's the intimate relationship between sport and recreation in a community, right? But again, who's not there? And then health is standing there going, how can I influence this? Where are my outcomes? And because it's public health and they don't have near as much money as healthcare, it's really hard for them to do lots of big things, right? So here's my solution. No. So part of what I'm hoping I want you to think about today is how can we take this piece right here and get the community to support what needs to happen as an outcome here? How can the community support you in your job around developing better movers? Can recreation come out of its physical plant into the community and work with schools? Can sport come out of their clubs and work with communities? Can we have a community-based approach? The other thing that's interesting about this as well, we know we have after-school care, the golden period called 3 to 6 in the afternoon, right? We know about 25 to 30% of the kids are in after-school care. The rest of the kids go home and lock themselves in the house, for the most part, right? Young kids. We also know that in after-school care, usually about an hour of that 3 hours is activity. So as a ratio goes, it's pretty good. Also, it's not as challenged as the in-school space politically, right? And by structure and by all the other things that are distracting you, all your other subjects, right? Because you're a generalist, you have to do everything, and you're supposed to do it really well. So how can we marry after school to in school and support it at the community level? And can health come to the table and help facilitate this discussion? How can that happen? So I want you to think about that, because we're going to talk a little bit more about that this afternoon. Physical literacy assessment. It's a burgeoning area. This is just going to talk very briefly about this. The reason I want to talk about this is it's starting to happen in pockets around the country. Physical literacy assessment, there are about 4 tools in Canada right now to assess physical literacy, and the rest of the world 0. So Canada's kind of leading the way around that, so it's pretty good. And we'll talk more about that this afternoon, but it should measure more than just the skills. Skills are a start, but it should also be looking at the confidence and the comprehension, and we'll talk more about that this afternoon as well. 2 more times. 3 more times. 1 more. Thank you. Like I've done the slide deck a few times. So this is an interesting piece we've done in Ontario, ministry-supported after-school care in Ontario. It's 20,000 kids, 425 sites distributed around the province, lower socioeconomic kids. Okay? In January of 2014, the Government of Ontario, Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, engaged us to provide an intervention in after-school care. So what we did was we actually brought in 2 tools. The Play Fun tool, which I'll show you this afternoon. It's 18 skills and tasks. It's not exhaustive, but it's pretty representative. It's catching, throwing, skipping, hopping, jumping, running. And we had them assess kids in January and in May. And just under 5,000 kids were assessed during that period, because we know after school has got a little bit of flux to it, right? There's a little come and go. We actually assessed almost 7,000 kids in total. We also did a self-reporting questionnaire for the kids. Now, these kids were 6 to 18. The sweet spot was 6 to 13. That's where the majority of the kids, or 6 to 12 was actually the majority of the kids. So what did we find out? So when we gave the intervention in January, a lot of the feedback from the after-school leaders was that when they actually had a moment to look at Johnny and go, Johnny can't throw, or Janie can't kick, they started to find out a lot of information. They got informed, a bunch of aha moments. So what happened was they started to change their practice. They started to change their programming. And we found that over the 4-month period, they actually improved the skills of the kids by upwards of 6%. But we also found out some not so good news. Everything to the right is boys, everything to the left is girls. Houston, do we have a problem? Other than skipping, shock and surprise on that one, and galloping and hopping, the boys increase physical literacy better than the girls. Pretty substantially, too. We did this intervention 2 more times, and we got the exact same information. So, for the first time ever, the Trillium Foundation in Ontario and the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport are co-funding a research project out of McMaster University to figure out why this is happening. We have some ideas. I think, you know, even thinking right now, you probably have some ideas going through your head. So when a young girl comes up to you and says, I don't feel very comfortable doing that, that's okay, dear, you can sit down. When a young boy comes up and says, I don't feel very comfortable doing that, what do? Do we treat them differently? Maybe you don't, but do you see as a practice that could be happening? We think that's part of it. We think it's part of the instruction model. We think it's part of how we treat boys and girls in various things that they're doing. But we need to find this out. So the whole intervention is about, or the whole research project is built around, let's find out what's going on. Let's make some recommendations. Let's develop an intervention with OFIA and drop it into the fall and see if it works. So over the next year, we hope to discover much more about why this is happening and trying to change it. Now, I have to tell you as well that, yes, the boys are improving physical literacy better than the girls, but the whole thing has to improve, period. It's still both low. It's just the girls are even lower. So next slide, I'm just going to show you 2 slides that are particular to the girls. So this is just dribbling a ball with a foot. So have a soccer ball, dribble the ball. Girls are green, boys are blue. You can see right now they're tracking along. Girls, other than this aberration at 14, small group of kids, the girls are less than the boys. Go to the next one, Emma. This is the very worrisome one. This is confidence. You can see the girls are actually higher than the boys when they're young, when you have them. I'm sure you see how the girls are dominating the boys at that age. And then it tracks along till about age 8 to 10 as we see as the break point, where girls are now not getting enough time on task, hence they're not building their competence. They start losing their confidence. And it starts to drop off. And we start to see now, why are all these young teenage girls not confident movers? What's happening here, right? So we're starting to see that. Now, we are seeing some innovation happening in high school around PE where girls are being engaged in a different way, which is great. You know, whether it's a fitness stream, yoga, Pilates, martial arts, different things like that, where we're trying to be a little bit more creative. the team sport model in high school PE is not always a happy place for people. It's just not. Right? So we need to be smarter. We need to build a better mousetrap as we go along. The other thing we ask the kids as well in the self-reported questionnaire is reading and writing, math, and movement important in different settings? So this is low. No, it's not very important. This is high. Yes, it's important. So the upper left-hand red circle is reading and writing important in school. Well, of course it is. They value it highly. Is reading and writing important at home with my family? Not so much. And is reading and writing important with my friends? Like, really? You kidding me? Is math important in school? Yeah, even more than reading and writing, because that's actually one of the only places we do math. Is math important at home with my family? Not so much. And it's definitely not so important with my friends. Oh yeah, let's go talk math, guys. Yeah, for sure. So we use the term movement. We didn't use physical literacy. Is movement important in school? Well, no, it's not as important as reading and writing and math, because we haven't valued it in school to the same level. We, the collective we, us adults. Is movement important with my family? More important than reading and writing and math? And the pièce de résistance is movement important with my friends. This is the social engagement piece of our kids. Kids love to move. They're telling us they want to move. And I can't emphasize enough, and you see this every day with your kids, activity is a social thing. There's two reasons why kids get involved in sport: fun and friends. There's two reasons why they get out of sport. It's no longer fun, and my friends are gone. We need to be smarter. We need to fix this. And we know that for those of you that interact with the sports system, in particular the team sports system, in particular soccer and hockey, and some of the crazy people that are there. No, I mean, really, we have a handful of people in this country who have very strong opinions around how sport should be done, right? We should be specializing our kids at 7, 8, and 9. We should be repping them out, having house from there, because this kid's no good. What adults don't realize is this. Kids value this way more than adults do. And well, it's interesting. As adults, we value it too, right? When we do activity, what's one of the biggest things about doing activity? Doing it with others, right? Social. You go out and have a coffee afterwards. Wow, that was great, right? It's no different for kids. So the opportunity here is being missed in a big way. So I think we need to reframe that a little bit more. And we need to take advantage of how we can really respect the idea that, as I said at the beginning, when I talked about the Google page, how can we create that opportunity for kids to have some of that time on task on activity? Sorry. We'll go next one. Here are a couple websites. Again, you're getting a copy of this, so you don't have to write them down. Okay. Oh, next one. No, back. Sorry. There we go. We'll stay there for a second. Are we staying here now for a second? Good. So how many of you are familiar with LIN, Leisure Information Network? It's an Ontario-based national website. Leisure Information Network is really quite a good website. Actually, OFIA's got a ton of great stuff as well, PHE Canada. Actually, they all have lots of great stuff. That's why they're here. But LIN, we're doing a project with them right now where we're actually collating and categorizing all the web-based physical literacy resources on the interweb, putting them in and making them hopefully more simplistic to find, and building a learning lab to help connect people better to those resources. Because sometimes you have the person here and the resource here, and the person doesn't feel confident going over to that resource and using it. We need to bridge that gap. So whether it's through a mentor who's a human being, or whether through a learning lab or something like that, that's what we're going to do. Now I'm done. Thank you.